The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday night. Fourth show in a row. All right. I leave for California tomorrow morning, so I will be gone for almost 3 weeks. Southern California, then Northern California. No public events, so sorry. Just going to see friends and family and hanging out with business partners and just hopefully for a good time. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to seeing Leonard Peikoff. I'll see him Friday and Saturday. We got a couple of dates set up, so that is going to be fun. Looking forward to seeing my son. So yeah, it's going to be a good trip. I am looking forward to it. And then at the end of the trip, going to do some wine tasting in Sonoma. So a little bit of quick visit up to wine country in Sonoma, which is going to be amazing. So I'm not sure what the schedule is going to be over the next 2.5 weeks. We'll see what the setup is in the hotel. They have good Wi-Fi in the hotel, so I should be fine in terms of doing the show. I've done it from that hotel in the past. But time, when you're traveling and my wife is with me, exactly how much time we have and space in the hotel room and all that stuff, we will see how it all fits together and how it all works. If you're upset that there are no public events in California, then next time, organize one. Don't expect stuff to just happen to you. If you want something, make it happen. Make it happen. All right, that's true all over the country. Like, ask Jennifer. Jennifer makes events, in the Midwest happen. And you can do so in the West Coast. You can do so in the East Coast. You can do so in the South. We can do all that. I will be in Austin, Texas in December for a debate discussion, panel discussion. We're going to talk about the differences between Ayn Rand and C.S. Lewis's analysis of the culture mid-century. That should be fun. What's going to require me to do is read up on C.S. Lewis, which will be fun and interesting between now and then. But it is that will be happening at the University of Texas in November 30th, and you guys, I encourage you, if you're in Austin, and my guess is like 90% of you are already in Austin, I hope you come to the event. It should be interesting. It should be fun. It's going to be sponsored by the brand new, this will be one of the first events, sponsored by the brand new Civitas Center Institute, which was the Liberty Institute, but changed its name, which is a new institute at the University of Texas that I'm excited to be able to work with. All right, today we've got basically two topics. I was trying to avoid the first topic, but I guess you can't really, given that it's like everywhere and all over the news, and it is important. So we will talk about the FBI raid on Trump's home in Florida. So we'll start off the show by talking about that, its implications, what I think of it. Not a lot of information, so it's going to be whatever we think about it. It's going to be tentative. And then I want to talk about land acknowledgements. Land acknowledgements. I didn't even know such a thing existed. My guess is some of you did. I didn't know this woke nonsense existed. But I guess this University of Washington professor is being penalized for making fun of it. And so we'll talk about that. Again, thanks to Barry Weiss for bringing this to my attention. If you want to know what's going on in the world of woke, if you want a good analysis of it, if you want a good write-up on it, it's always well written. Then Barry Weiss's Substack is definitely an excellent source of information about all of that. All right. Just a reminder to everybody, you can use the Super Chat feature to ask questions and to support the show. We have a goal every show to reach $650 of support. You can do that by just clicking at the bottom of your screen there. There is a option, a Super Chat option. You can sign up and you can make contributions up to $500. And ideally ask a question as well and therefore contribute to the content of the show. You can also make a comment. I promise to read the comment on air, so you can make your voice heard that way. So thank you for all the super chatters and those of you who support the show on Patreon, Subscribestar, or on PayPal on a monthly basis. Thanks to everybody. All right, let's. I guess we should jump in. So, as you know, yesterday the FBI raided Donald Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago, I can't pronounce it, in Florida. And while Trump was in New York, they, I guess, went through all the stuff, opened up a safe, and took a bunch of documents from the home. Not clear what those documents are, not clear what it is exactly they were looking for, what it is exactly they found. The best hypothesis out there is that this is part of an ongoing investigation and search of documents that Trump took after he left the White House and took with him home, documents that were supposed to be handed over to the presidential archive, some of them potentially top secret, although again, nobody really knows, and a variety of other things. So I guess the law is, and this is codified in law, is that when a president leaves the White House, they're supposed to hand over everything, all written documentation, all their records, any tapes they made, any notes they took, any letters they got, anything like that relates even tangentially to government business is not theirs, but is the state's, and they need to hand it over to the National Archive or whatever. Trump, it seems, clearly did not do this, and it seems that he took a bunch of stuff with him home. The Justice Department has met already with Trump in the past. He has handed over, I guess, boxes of documents that he took home, and they've been returned. And the guessing is that there were still some documents that he had not handed over that they believed were in his home in Florida, and that the intention of the raid was to get at those documents and to return them and potentially build a case against Trump as having violated this specific law. I don't know if that's why they were there. I don't know if that's what they were looking for. I don't know if they found anything or didn't find anything. It's hard to tell what motivated them. There's no news coming out from the Justice Department or the FBI about what this is all about and what they found and what motivated them and what's the investigation or anything else. The idea that Trump broke the law, or the idea that Trump does and is doing and has done shady things, certainly does not come as a shock to anybody. But this is the problem. The problem is that Americans have completely lost trust in their institutions. And in particular, given the performance of the FBI during the Trump administration and all the scandals and all the bias and FBI agents saying what they said on record, going after Trump, the FBI has lost any credibility. Now, the Justice Department, is a political entity. We know that. I mean, the only credible thing the Justice Department has done in the last 6 years is tell Trump that he lost the election and not buy into the conspiracy theories. So, the Justice Department is clearly politicized, has been politicized, is likely to be politicized. And it's very difficult to tell in the world in which we live whether this raid is justified under the idea of everybody's equal before the law, and if Trump broke the law, then and there was a warrant issued, then so be it. Then his place is searched, just like if there was, if the FBI, if the Justice Department thought I broke the law, they wouldn't hesitate for 1 second to come here with a warrant and search my place. Why is Trump special? And my first instinct is, yeah, equality before the law means whether you're a candidate for the president, whether you're a former president, whether you're a future president, doesn't matter. If you break the law, you're investigated, and part of that investigation could involve searching your home. What's the big deal? The problem is that we live in an environment, we live at a time where everything has been politicized. And whether this particular investigation is politicized or not makes no difference. It's perceived as being political. It's taken as being political. I mean, maybe if the Justice Department comes out with real evidence and they can show it, and maybe that'll convince people that it wasn't political. But really, it's going to take a lot. And the silence on the part of the Justice Department, even though the appropriate procedure after a search like this, silence, given the political environment, it makes this a lot worse. And I understand why they're silent, but it's a problem. So I can understand why, under the right circumstances, it needed to be done. If he broke the law, and they really believe he broke the law, and it's serious, and they've tried by every other means to get what they need to get, and they couldn't. But nobody's going to believe them, no matter what they say. Well, nobody is a big, but half of America is not going to believe them. And the thing that really worries me about this, the thing that really troubles me around this, and I don't think, is the fact that this is the one thing that could be the tipping point. Not only, certainly for Trump to run and to win the Republican nomination, because now he can claim to be a victim, and he loves playing the victim. He can play the victim, and he can say that he's been victimized by the left because he's the only one who will stand up to the left, and Republicans must vote for him because he is the only one who can stand up for the left. And look, they even came after him with the Justice Department. Look, they even raided his house. So it's this is gonna encourage Trump to run. It might even, because it'll become so popular among Republicans, it might even discourage people like DeSantis and others from running against him. Because I think if he was a favorite already, now he'll become an even bigger favorite because he's got this persecution thing going on. He's got now this victimhood going on. So I don't know. It's very depressing. I look at my Twitter feed, I look at Facebook, I look everywhere, and what I see are people saying things like, I'm no Trump fan, I don't like Trump, but this is completely political. They don't know the facts. They don't know what's going on, but they've already decided it's political. They've made up their mind, and now they're basically much more favorably inclined towards Trump than they were before. So it's almost like Trump has a mole in the Justice Department that got them to do this so he could benefit from it. Because this is a huge benefit to him. Now, again, the only caveat to that is if they found something meaningful. They found something really, damning of Trump, and they can show it and prove it, then maybe it changes. And think about it. That unfortunately for Trump, the last few months, certainly the last few weeks, have been kind of a negative. He clearly lost a lot of people over the January 6th revelations, over what the committee came through, or some of the testimony. He was clearly, slowly losing support among Republicans, and polls were showing that DeSantis was rising while Trump was weakening. Although he was still winning, he was definitely weakening, and others within the Republican Party were strengthening. This will reverse all that. This gives him the perfect platform. Indeed, today, less than 24 hours after the raid happened on his home, Trump came out with a fundraising letter urging people to support him so he could stand up to the Justice Department and the FBI and all the evil swamp that is trying to attack him and destroy him and so on. So whether it's true or not, whatever the motivations of the Justice Department happen to be, it doesn't matter. Trump wins. Trump wins. And I don't know if he can win a general election or lose a general election. It's so hard to tell, given how unpopular Biden is, and given the unlikelihood that the Democrats can come up with anybody who's any good, never mind popular. I don't know if Trump would lose. I mean, the hope was the Republicans would choose somebody else, somebody better, and take advantage of the fact that Biden or whatever Democrat ran was very weak, given the economy's probably going to be weak, and therefore a Republican candidate could win. But the last Republican candidate on planet Earth that I want to win is Trump, and I fear that this has made that all the more likely. And politics, everything changes so fast, so quickly, that you can't know. All right, so yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what the Justice Department actually comes out with. If you want to ask me a question about anything, you can use the Super Chat feature. $5. Florida Nick has a question up there for $5. I have no hope. If Aldrin wants, give us hope. I have no hope. I mean, the Republican Party is in much, much worse shape than I could have imagined. I predicted this, by the way, to a large extent because of Trump. The Democratic Party is awful and horrific and beholden to the crazy left. The Republican Party now has become basically a populist / conservative nationalist party with Christianity gaining ever more strength within the party. It's a very depressing environment. It's a very depressing environment. And the fact is that every indication right now is that it's going to get worse. And I see, I was the one who tried to talk Leonard Peikoff when he was writing The Dim Hypothesis to be more optimistic. Now I think he was too optimistic. Too optimistic. And that indeed, I was just thinking about this today. Would I be surprised if the United States was had an authoritarian government in 10 years? And the answer is no. The answer is no. Wow, Ashton, thank you. I'll get to the question in a minute. I would not be surprised if 10 years from now we were already authoritarian. And that's a big change for me. That's a big change for me. And that could not have happened without Trump and everything he symbolizes and everything he represents. He has basically, unleashed the worst elements and the worst tendencies possible within the Republican Party on this country. And now you basically have no opposition. You have Democrats, which are horrible, and Republicans who are horrible. And that's it. That's all you have. That's all you have. And, both sides, right, rushing to grab as much power as they can. So it's, yes, it is very, very depressing. And look, how do you come back as a country from a situation where you don't trust the FBI? I mean, now look, in many respects, we should have never trusted the FBI. And suddenly, the FBI was a lot more politicized and a lot worse, 50 years ago than it is today. I mean, in the day of J. Edgar Hoover, everybody had a file at the FBI. If J. Edgar Hoover was alive today and running the FBI the way he ran it back then, I would have a file in the FBI as a anti-social, I don't know, something, right? As an influencer trying to cause upheaval in America. And Rand certainly had a file at the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover ran the FBI as a politicized entity and did horrible things and spied on people. And yeah, I mean, so in some respects, we're freer today. We're less influenced today than the J. Edgar Hoover FBI. So maybe the pessimism is unwarranted. It's always been this bad. But there's a sense in which the fact that we were ignorant of that was some sense bliss. That is, the American people still trusted the basic institutions of government. They basically trusted the police. Stephen, thank you. Stephen, thank you. They basically trusted the FBI. They certainly trusted the justice system and the courts, even though, again, a lot of travesties of justice happened back then. But because of this lack of trust now, we don't trust Congress, we don't trust the president, we don't trust the courts, certainly don't trust the courts, and we don't trust the FBI and the Justice Department. This is a recipe for chaos. It's a recipe for a strongman. It's a recipe for somebody to come about and say, well, you can trust me. I'll clean it up. I'll tidy everything up. Now, it won't be Trump because Trump is too incompetent to be able to do that. But it'll be somebody leveraging the condition of the world with which Trump leaves us. The hatred, the disregard for any sense of truth, the disregard for any sense of values, the disregard for any sense of what America stands for, the emptying out of the American Constitution and what it means to be an American, the emptying out of the concept of Americanism. I mean, that is what he's very good at. That is what he's been successful at. And what it leaves us with is nothing, just a grab for power. A grab for power. So, if you're interested in why I think the way I do about Trump, I did dozens and dozens and dozens of shows, starting in 2015 and ending not that long ago, about Trump, articulating my case against him, articulating exactly what he was, why he was, in my view, the most damaging president in American history. Not the worst president in the sense of policy, but the most damaging president in American history to America, to what America is, and to the future of America. That is thoroughly documented. You can go back and look at it. But anyway, that's so. Those of you been here for a while know that. Well, I mean, yeah, Obama was really bad, and Obama was really bad, and you could argue Obama was worse because Obama gave us Trump. Without Obama, there is no Trump. So in that sense, Obama might be worse because he led us to Trump. But no, Trump was one step beyond Obama in terms of degradation of this country and degrading the institutions and everything about the history of this country and everything about again what it is that America stands for, and American exceptionalism and everything like that. So, but as I said, my opinions are well documented. I have no interest in arguing with people in the chat about it right now, yeah, you guys can ask super chat questions or. All right, let's see. Before I go on to the land acknowledgements, let's take Ashton's. We'll see how many unsubscribes I have tomorrow because on my little rant about Trump and all the new people who didn't realize how I felt about Trump. Suddenly, oh my God, he really thinks that. But notice nobody's actually going to go up and challenge my assertions in the super chat. They'll just yap away on the chat. Ashton says, is it even possible for a nation as advanced and complex as the United States to descend and arithmetize, I don't even know what that means, into civil war? Also, did you check out Rucka's video I requested, A History of Philosophy Rap? I have not yet, but it's on my, it's definitely on my to-do list. So I'm going to do videos on this trip that I'm going to go on. So in the next, I promise to review it in the next 2 weeks. Even though, as I said, I'm not looking forward to it. But yes, all of that. I've got that. You guys can tell me if I missed something. I've got the Rucka History of Philosophy. I've got Dave Goodman, The Patriot with Mel Gibson. I've got 2 Star Trek episodes from Shazbot. Those are the 4 videos I'm supposed to review. I will give a priority to the History of Philosophy by Rucka. And I'll do that soon. Let's see. Is it even possible for a nation advanced and complex as the United States to descend into civil war? I mean, I don't know. I don't know if civil war is the way in which we disappear. I don't know if or the way in which we decline. I don't know if civil war is the way in which we attain authoritarianism. I mean, it's not necessary. It's quite possible that you get a charismatic unifier, somebody who can unify at least significant elements within the left with significant elements with the right, and rule from some kind of new agreement, new perspective. So you can take a very divided nation. I'm not comparing anybody to the Nazis. Don't claim that. But if you can take Hitler in Germany, and and you would say Hitler's going to be a dictator of Germany 3 months before he became it. Everybody would have said that's insane. Germans are, they're not that, the nationalist parties have not won that much. The left is very powerful in Germany. The communists are very powerful in Germany. How is he going to rule over all these people who oppose? The country's split. The country's divided 50-50 between the right and the left. And then comes somebody who has some form of charisma, some form of ability to rally the forces, and with the right kind of political events happening, and the willingness to be brutal towards his opposition, somebody like that can take over a country. And could somebody do that in the United States? It's hard to imagine today, because you've got the United States has states. States would object, would rally against it. Would that drive towards a civil war? Would California, for example, object? Well, it's really hard to tell. It depends on what the platform that this authoritarian rises on. And I've often said that you need a platform that takes certain elements, that grants certain things to the left, that gives them something to latch onto, with the elements that unite the right, which are primarily, I think, religion and nationalism. So the flag, Jesus, and environmentalism maybe, could rally both left and right. I don't know that that's going to happen. That's just my sense. Could it happen in America? I think so. Do I see a civil war? I don't, but and are we too complex to have a civil war? I don't know that complexity is the issue. Are we too advanced to have a civil war? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't see why, if we're advanced, why do we have land acknowledgements? We'll get to that in a minute. Why do we have woke? Why do we have people thinking that the country needs to be more Christian? That the country needs to be, that we need to impose a moral code on kids in schools. Why are people thinking, behaving the way they are if we're so advanced? Are we really advanced? We might be advanced materially and technologically. Are we advanced morally? Are we advanced philosophically? Are we advanced ideologically? Are the ideas that are being battled out right now in America the same primitive ideas that caused us to battle it out in the mid-20th century, in the battle between the West and communism and fascism, or the same ideas that we've been battling throughout Western history? So, that is the real challenge. Denki T says, because religion is healthy, religious societies are better. Like Iran, that's a healthy and better society. Like the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, West, that was healthy and a better society. Yeah, absolutely. If that's what you think is healthy and better, go for it, right? Go for it. But I consider those barbaric, horrific, horrible. The founding era of America was far less religious than the religious right is today. Far less religious than the religious right today. And the USSR was religious. It just had a different religion. Religion of the proletarian, religion of Marx. But anyway, those are all topics for another day. Religious societies are sick. It's in spite of religion. It's the secularization of the Enlightenment that made America possible, that made America a great country, that made and made the West what it is: rich, successful, prosperous. It's the secularization. It's the negation of religious dogma. All right. You really should study American history. sometimes I'm talking to some of the people in the chat. All right, Ashton. So I don't think, unfortunately, not unfortunately, fact is, reality is that ideas drive history. Ideas shape history. And not technology, not wealth. Rome was very advanced and very complex, and empire, and it ruled the world, and it was solid. It was, who thought Rome would disappear? And yet, the ideas of the Neoplatonists, the ideas of Christianity, basically rotted Rome from within, and that rot basically destroyed, right? It destroyed this country. It destroyed Rome. And, similar ideas, the ideas of postmodernism on the left, and, nihilism on left and right, and of religion and a gross form of nationalism now on the right, are rotting America from within. They're rotting the soul. They're rotting the people. They're rotting their attitude. And then it's just a question of, do the barbarians invade us and take over? Unlikely. It's much more likely that we just rot, become, in a sense, barbarians ourselves, or descend ourselves into a form of Dark Ages. Oh my God! People are really, really, really struggling, and this is true of all religionists. They're really stretching. They know they're really pushing. They know that really is when they try to make out the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, to be better than they were. Oh no, it wasn't that bad. Oh God, you guys should actually read. You should actually read what life was like, and the difference, and why the Renaissance was a Renaissance, and a Renaissance not of Christianity. Renaissance was not a Renaissance of Christianity. The Renaissance was a Renaissance of Greece, of classical civilization. All right, thank you, Ashton. I don't know. I'm not sure what free trade. I'm going to do two more questions and then go back to the topic. We did that one. One second. Let me just do that. Free trade says, if I was a power adversarial to America, like Russia or China, I would support and finance the most irrational actors on either side of the political divide, instigate conflict, regression, and possibly a civil war or breakup of the Union. And do you think they're not doing that? They are doing that. We know they're doing that. We know Russia, that Putin has funded environmentalist groups trying to shut down oil production in the United States, and particularly in Europe, but even in the United States. We know that Russia and China, spread all kinds of propaganda during the 2016 and 2020 elections. We know that they both set up bots and all kinds of stuff and flooded the world with false news in order to try to disrupt the American election, to try to create as much havoc, and to try to get their favorite candidate elected. So we know that both China and Russia, particularly Russia, but China as well, China's just not as sophisticated yet at doing this, have been actively trying to instigate conflict and to support the most irrational. Many of these conspiracy theories that come on, particularly on the right, are Russian sourced. The Russians come up with it, and then they start spreading it among right-wing groups, and they do that on the right. And then on the left, they fund the worst type of environmentalist. I wouldn't be surprised if the Russians had funded parts of Black Lives Matter. So they're doing it. It's a perfect strategy for them. And the more irrational our culture is, the more unable it is to differentiate between falsehood and truth, the more unable they are to differentiate between reality and fantasy, the more enamored they are with complete and utter nonsense on the left and with the worship of personality, i.e. Trump, on the right, the easier it becomes for them. So we, the American people, unfortunately, because of, I think, decades and decades of frustration and anxiety over you know, the incompetence and of the mixed economy and of our politicians and of just the grayness of the world that our culture has produced, the gray view of the world that our culture has produced, is produced an America that's frustrated, angry, and ready for dramatic change. And I'm pretty convinced that that dramatic change will come from the right in the form of you know, real authoritarianism. And yeah, the Russians and Chinese are eager for that to happen and will fund it any way that they can. Finally, Justin says, in Australia, most business email signatures now have an acknowledgement to the First People nations. Most public events, clubs, meetings, arts, openings, and any other gathering are kicked off with a land acknowledgement. Thanks, Justin. I didn't know this, I guess. I mean, I guess at some recess of my mind, I knew that stuff like this was happening. But it turns out that in the U.S. now, many companies start with this called land acknowledgement. So this is now you know, a practice where you are preceding any fancy event or any business event, you name the indigenous people that were slaughtered or whose land was taken on which the event is being held, and you kind of give them an acknowledgement. Nothing more than that. You don't you know, give them any money. You don't promise to give the land back. You don't do anything substantive, but you make an acknowledgement. You give it a sanction. And so this came to my attention because of a story that Barry Weiss wrote about a professor, Professor Stuart Regis, at the University of Washington. He's a computer science professor. I mean, this guy is like, he likes to, you know, rub it in. He likes to be controversial. He likes to get out there. This is a guy that in the 1980s, with a very early in his career, made a big deal out of the fact that he was gay, and it was openly gay at a time when that was not very popular, and that could really get you in trouble. In the 1990s, when he was at Stanford, he was out there protesting against the war on drugs. He's written a piece about why women can't code. That'll get you in trouble. And he's got a poem on his website titled "Fag Talk." So not a traditional anything, not a traditional left, not a traditional right, not a traditional anything really. Kind of eclectic, but certainly nonconformist. Anyway, at the beginning of the fall 2020 semester, fall 2020 is when the world seemed to just give in to the left. Anything the left wanted, yes, sir, we give it to you. This is the consequence, so the fact that Black Lives Matter won the moral high ground back then, everybody just collapsed in front of them. So not only on the Black Lives Matter specific issue did they collapse, but they collapsed on pretty much every issue out there, and this was one of them. So the University of Washington, in the fall of 2020, suggested as best practices that professors, when on documents like syllabi, when they publish their syllabi, they include an indigenous land acknowledgement statement. That is a statement that acknowledges that the University of Washington is built on land that once belonged to some Indian, some Native American tribe, right? You know, it's meant to acknowledge this fact. Now, obviously, Professor Regis doesn't think very highly of these. He says, quote, land acknowledgements are performative arts of conformity that should be resisted. So last school year, instead of reprinting the university-approved language, which is, quote, the University of Washington acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Squamish, Tulip, and whatever nations. So that's it. That's acknowledgement. Just acknowledging that this is their land, or this was their land, is their land. Regis constructed his own disclaimer, and he put up on top of his syllabus, he said, quote, I acknowledge that by the labor theory of property, this is John Locke's theory of property, by the labor theory of property, the Coast Salish people can claim historical ownership of almost none of the land currently occupied by the University of Washington. And that appeared in his syllabus at the top page, at the top of the page. It's very educational. There's the whole issue of what is the, labor theory of property. Unsurprisingly, the university was pissed off, and they retaliated. They unilaterally uploaded a censored version of the syllabus, took off his statement without any acknowledgement, locked him out of being able to make any changes to his own syllabus, so he couldn't access it. And then they launched an investigation of Regis, right? They also established a competing class section at the same hour as his class section in order to siphon students away from him. Just think about how petty and how childish these people are, right? They couldn't fire him because he's got tenure, so they do all this stuff. Right? Now remember, the statement that they wanted placed there, they said was a recommendation. What they didn't like was the fact that he made fun of it. Didn't make fun of it. Maybe told the truth about it. So Regis is still teaching there, but he has now filed a lawsuit against the University of Washington. It's a lawsuit filed by FIRE, so good for FIRE for launching this. FIRE protects the free speech rights of, or academic freedom rights of professors at universities. They tend to defend professors against university administrations. To quote the writer that I'm reading from her article that she wrote for Barry Weiss, she says this threat comes from both left and right, the threat to academic freedom. 2/3 of sanctions attempted from the left of the professor result in some form of sanction. 42% of attempts from the right of wherever the professor is politically result in sanction. They typically defend these. They fight for them, and they do amazing work in the name of free speech, but primarily academic freedom, violating the contract that the schools, the universities have with these professors. It really is, the situation in universities has gotten so much worse over the last 2 years. Professors are now expected to mouth opinions stamped with the approval of some bureaucrat in the administration. The state of universities is truly horrific. Anyway, so what is it about this land acknowledgement? And or maybe, I mean, the land acknowledgement is obviously ridiculous and silly. I mean, you could make fun of it in a variety of different ways. Somebody on the chat just did. What did he say? You know, I think John said he lives in a house that was taken from of land that was taken from the Comanches, who took it from another tribe, who, you know, defaced it by you know, building something on Mother Nature to begin with. So really, the land belongs to Mother Nature and not to any of these tribes. But almost everybody thinks that these land acknowledgements are ridiculous. I mean, I read an article in The Atlantic from a leftist who says, look, land acknowledgements is just moral exhibitionism. It's just lip service. It means nothing. I mean, where are the reparations? Where is the giving the land back? Where's paying them money? Where's the recognition of the real suffering that is happening among Native Americans today? Where's the recognition of the fact that they are the poorest people in America today? Their rates of alcoholism, their rates of suicide, rates of depression are higher on Indian reservations than in any other place in America. Instead of recognizing that, instead of working to fix that, instead of doing anything about it, people get up and they have these written statements in advance that somebody's written on. They might have worked 5 minutes to pronounce the name of the Indian tribes right, and then they do it, and that's it. And this does bring up, I think, an important issue, an issue that I did a show on a few years back about the treatment of American Indians, about the treatment of Native Americans, which I think is horrific and a massive injustice in American history. But it does bring up the question of, okay, what do you do about this injustice? And what was the injustice exactly? How do you describe the injustice? How do you define the injustice? Was the injustice the taking of the land? And what does it even mean to take land from nomads? Or what does it mean to take land for people who didn't recognize right to land? And who exactly did he take the land from? I mean, I think, first of all, the idea that we in the 21st century should feel sorry and apologize or do anything about, and let's say there were injustices. And there were injustices. There's no question there were injustices. There were treaties broken. There was brutal treatment. There was horrific treatment of the Native Americans in the 19th century in America. There's no question about that. And it goes on to this day. To this day, Native Americans in the reservations are wards of the state, which is horrific, and we'll get to that in a minute. But there were massive injustices. Land was stolen. What was it? The Sioux were given a piece of land, and then gold was discovered on that land, so they were taken to the most barren place on planet Earth and given a piece of land there, and so that the miners could go and mine the gold that was in the hills. Instead of, you had a treaty giving them the land, why don't they benefit from the mining? Anyway, it's horrors happened. The question is, what do you do about it in the 21st century? Well, you don't apologize for it, because you didn't do anything. Your ancestors, some of our ancestors weren't even on the continent back then. Certainly my ancestors were not. But even if they were, maybe they should have apologized. Maybe they should have paid something and paid in some way for the evils they committed. But you, today, it's the same thing about slavery. Slavery is a horrific evil. Jim Crow laws were horrific evils. But I didn't do them. I'm not at fault. Taking my money to compensate people who are also not the people who suffered under slavery, certainly, and most of them not even under Jim Crow laws, is just a massive injustice. So the first thing to do is recognize what actually happened. And what actually happened is a combination of violence initiated by Native Americans against peaceful people, and then losing a war, People lose wars all the time. Some real injustices where treaties were broken or where land was just taken or where people were just annihilated when that was not what was really needed, what was really necessary. And also recognize, as Ayn Rand did, also recognize the fact that in a clash, as Ayn Rand said, in a clash between a growing civilization, between an advanced civilization and a more primitive civilization, the primitive civilization is going to lose in a variety of different ways. And then add to that the fact that particularly in the Pacific Northwest, let's say, 90% of the Native Americans who died in the Pacific Northwest didn't die because they were murdered, didn't die because their land was taken over by whites. They died of disease. Died of disease brought to them by Europeans, yes, but not on purpose. What kind of moral claim do you have that because you carried a disease that they not happen to be immune from and you infected them, you're morally responsible? That can't be right. Does that mean the Chinese are responsible for the Black Death in Europe? Because that Black Death came over to Europe from China? So you have to recognize all the different sources of what happened. Again, 80 to 90% of the Native Americans in the Pacific Northwest died from diseases. The same thing is true of COVID. Unless they did it on purpose, unless COVID was militarized, and then it's hard to understand why the Chinese would do it to themselves because they're suffering in some respects more than we are from COVID. But yeah, you can't, if COVID was natural, let's assume COVID was natural for the purpose of this discussion. I'm not saying it was, let's just assume it. If COVID was natural, then you can't blame China for it. That's ridiculous. You can blame China for suppressing information, you can blame China for not cooperating, you can blame China for not doing what was necessary, but you can't blame China for the very fact that this naturally arose. So you have to recognize all these things. And if you really study history and you're really interested in what happened to the American Indians, to Native Americans, and why it was so devastating, and what the source of the American injustice towards them is, then that study of history is really useful, because if you really study it, the source of the injustice is that Native Americans were not treated as individuals. Now, part of it is their fault because they didn't take themselves to be individuals. They were members of tribes. But we, as the more civilized, we, as the more advanced culture, what we should have done is refuse to treat them as tribes and treat them as individuals and assign them property rights, not as a tribe, but as individuals. So in that sense, we should have been even more cultural colonialists. We should have imposed our culture of individualism, our culture of property rights on the Native Americans. We should have refused to accept that the tribal leader speaks for the tribe, that the tribal council owns all the property for the tribe. And we should have at least tried to assign property rights to individuals. To this day, the Native American reservations, there was no private property on these reservations. Nobody owns anything. The tribal government owns everything. It's a true statism, true socialism. tribal, to this day, we don't treat individuals within these Indian nations as individuals. We treat them as collectives. We treat them as a group. And since they have no private, but even then, a lot of these tribes sit on mineral rights. Well, if they want to develop the mineral rights, individuals can't do it. The tribe has to decide. And the tribe can't decide by itself. It has to get permission from the government, from the US government, the federal government. So they're doubly screwed. If you're an individual and you happen to sit on oil, you can't lease it out to Exxon or Chevron. The tribe has to do it. And the tribe can't do it unless it gets permission from the Biden administration. Good luck with that. So we have taken these, Native Americans, and to this day, they have no individual dignity, no property. They receive welfare checks. If the sound is weird, it's because of the ether, it's because of the cloud, it's because of the internet, not because of anything on my end. We treat them as, they are it's the one area in this country where you have full-blown socialism. And with full-blown socialism, what do you get? With full-blown socialism, you get alcoholism, you get depression, you get high suicide rates. Now, it's hard for America today to encourage anybody to be an individualist when we, the country of individualism, are turning our back to individualism and becoming a tribal collectivistic culture. So, the real tragedy of Native Americans is that their leadership failed them. But to some extent, at least in the 19th century, their leadership was ignorant, knew nothing. The real tragedy is that American leadership that knew intellectual leadership, political leadership, that knew what was right, it betrayed the Native Americans. It betrayed them. It continues to betray them. The treatment of Native Americans today by the federal government is just horrific. Just horrific. And the solution to it is to privatize the reservations, to force them to divide the land up, turn it into private property, get rid of the reservation as a reservation, make them full-fledged citizens of the United States, and give them the respect that private property, treat them with respect by giving them the private property, and treating them as full citizens. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen, partially because, unfortunately, this is where their own intellectuals and their own leaders betrayed them. This is not what the tribes want, because the tribal leaders have power today, which they wouldn't have if you took all their property and divided it up and gave it to individuals. So if you want to acknowledge anything, acknowledge the great American sin of not consistently treating its own residents, people within its own geographic scope of governance, as individuals. Again, I don't know about the casinos and how the casinos function, the casinos on Indian reservations, and of course, not all reservations have casinos. You have to be in the right geographic location to be able to do that, but there's no question that those things have produced massive amounts of corruption. Again, an elite of certain tribal leaders getting most of the benefits, Stewart says, I didn't know this, Stewart says one Indian tribe that did privatization was the Mississippi Choctaw. That's why the Mississippi Choctaw have the highest standard of living than most American Indians and have many non-Indian employees. The Mississippi Choctaw got rich by manufacturing spoons and stereo equipment. But why did they stay on the reservation? If they privatized it, why wasn't the reservation just merged into the rest of the place and they dispersed to where the greatest opportunities were, which is what I'd expect ultimately to happen. And I would argue that it is the job of the federal government to force the tribes to privatize. This is not voluntary. You don't have, it's not okay to have slavery in America. It's not okay to have little socialist places where it's not voluntary for the people. People have lived on a particular plot of land forever, and the tribe claims it. Just give it to the people who live on it. Yeah, a lot of Native Americans who managed to escape the system have done very well, have managed to get off the reservations. Or some Indian tribes scattered. Many of the East Coast Indian tribes actually integrated into American society. It's particularly true on the East Coast. A lot of the casinos are built on, the tribes who build them are tribes that are kind of ex-post realized. They're tribes that have lost touch, and then suddenly somebody realized, oh, there's an opportunity to build casinos, so let's recreate the tribe. Right? But I think the real sad thing is just, again, the collectivism, the lack of individualism that is part of the legacy of this system. All right. Thanks, everybody. That was interesting. Let's see if there are any related. Yeah. John Bale said, oh, I think I quoted this already. He says, my home sits on land stolen from the Comanche, who stole it from the Tonkawas, who stole it from the Caddos. And yeah, I mean, it's absurd. I'm Jewish, so I guess if I live in Israel, it's land that was stolen from the British, who stole it from the Ottomans, who stole it from maybe from the Romans, from the Byzantines, who stole it from the Romans, who stole it from the Arabs. No, Arabs is in between. So Arabs would be before the Ottomans. Who stole it from the Ottomans, who stole it from the Arabs, who stole it from the Byzantines, who stole it from the Romans, who stole it from, I don't know, the Jews and the Philistines and the Babylonians and the Egyptians and you could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on with the history of any piece of land in Israel, let's say. I mean, it's all fascinating and interesting history, but collectives don't have a right to land. Jews don't have a right to land in Israel because they're Jews. Palestinians don't have a right to the land because their ancestors lived there. Certainly Jews don't have a right to the land because 2,000 years ago Jews lived there. If we go back 2,000 years, we all lived in different places. There is no such thing. There's no such thing as ethnic rights to land. The Hungarians, core Hungarians, don't have a right to Hungary. Individuals have a right to land. And how do you gain the right to the land? I mean, this is what the author earlier was referring to. How do you get a right to the land? You get a right to the land from working it, from changing it, from investing in it, from fencing it off, from defining it. That's how you get the right to land. It's Locke's, theory that you mingle your labor with the land. That gives you the right to the land. Tribes don't have rights. Rights are only things that individuals can hold. There is no such thing as a collective right. So individual people have rights to individual property that they bought or created, in a sense. There is no, how far back do you have to go? Which people? By the way, the people living in Hungary today are not the same people that emigrated from Asia and conquered that part of the land and it gave that part of the land its language. Those people genetically are gone. The people who live in Hungary and speak Hungarian today are Germans. So there is no ethnic group right to land. There is no collective right to anything. All right, let's see what Thomas has to say. You have said that you think that we are past peak wokeness and that woke is on the decline. But it still seems to be doing a lot of damage to the universities and other cultural institutions, including the arts. Yes, I think what you're seeing now is it's peaking. It might be on the decline at the margins, but it's close to its peak, maybe on the other side of it. But it's definitely big at universities and cultural institutions, including the arts. But you see, the more light of day is shone on wokeness, the more we're aware of it, the more people like Barry Weiss write articles about it, expose it, reveal it, the more fires there are, FIRE, the Organization for Free Speech, who are suing universities, who sue cultural institutions, the more newspaper articles about it are, the more people in the center or the center left and center right write about it, discuss it in serious terms, not in the conspiratorial, wacky, crazy language of the right, but in serious terms, critique the wokeness. The more you shine light on it, the more pathetic it seems, the more ridiculous it seems, the more stupid it seems, and the more it will decline. And you're seeing on late night talk show hosts making fun of more and more of woke issues. You're seeing at universities more and more professors standing up against these kind of things. And I think you'll see more and more of that because it's so absurd, it's so ridiculous, that once people realize it's going on, they won't tolerate it. It's just too stupid to tolerate. This is the thing about the left. It's too disintegrated to be taken seriously. And therefore, I don't think ultimately people do. That's my view. It's why I think wokeness will ultimately fade. Not to say that the wacky left won't come up with something new. They will. They always do. Right? There'll be the next level, the next stage, the next spin, the next thing that they get excited about. It's not that these people are going to say, oh my God, we were wrong all those years. This is how we can become right. Although some of them will do that when the right authoritarian mood strikes them. Yeah, I mean, DI programs are still popular and they're growing, and but you know, people still roll their eyes at them and still think they're ridiculous and still just listen to this stuff. And I think, again, I think all of that, all the white, was it white fragility? What was it called? And anti-racism, all of that is peaking. All right, as I said, if you have questions, we're $1.63 short of our $650 goal. Instead of speculating on what Yaron thinks of this or what Yaron thinks of that, or is Yaron of this or is Yaron of that, just ask me. That's what the Super Chat is for. Just ask the question. I've never not answered a question. But no, you don't actually want me to answer the question. You want to just YBS on the chat. Yeah, Thomas, I mean, there's no question that damage is being done to a lot of people's lives. And by the way, the solution to wokeness is to fight them, is to stand up against them. And not, you don't have to do it alone anymore because of organizations like FIRE. You can get help, you can get assistance, you can get people to consult on how to do it best way. But the thing that empowers the woke more than anything else is capitulation, surrender. It's silence. It's the fact that people are silenced. RDF, thank you for that. You just put us. Put us into the 650, over 650. So I appreciate that. All right, thanks, Thomas. Okay, before you leave, I'd appreciate if you just like the show. If you like the show, please like it. We're at 100. We've got 150 people watching live right now. We've got 83 thumbs up. I think we can do better than that. It really helps with the algorithm. It helps overcome YouTube's bias against me, and there's no question. They repress my content. If you want to help overcome that, if you want to help, then the way to do that is to like the show and get that show number up to 150, and then the algorithm can't ignore it, or has a harder time ignoring it. All right, also, if you want to support the show, Super Chat is the way to do it if you're listening live. I answer all the questions in the Super Chat. I've got 4 more questions left. But you can still, the Super Chat is still open. You can use it. You can also use it just to support the show if you just want to support the show and not ask a question. You can also support the show on Patreon, on Subscribestar, on PayPal, on YaronBrookShow.com/support. So there are many, many ways you can support the show. One way, those are all 4 mechanisms by which you can support it on a monthly basis, which is my preferred way because it's predictable and I can plan based on it. But what you're doing is supporting my time in doing these shows, preparing the material, investing in it, trying to grow it. All of that is thanks to your contributions from the Super Chat and from the monthly contributions. Maybe that's why they don't ask using the Super Chat, because they actually don't want to support the Yaron Brook Show. They just want to be on the chat and bitch and complain. All right, Florida Nick. Will the ominous parallels ever be on Audible? I need it to complete my collection. I don't know. I don't own the rights. I am not the publisher. I have no control over that. I think I've complained about it many times to people who do have control over it. I'll mention it to Leonard again. I'll remind Leonard Peikoff that it is a shame that it's not on Audible, and see maybe he's willing to put a little pressure on the people who can make that change, but which is not the Ayn Rand Institute, it's the publisher. So I'll talk to Leonard about it. I'm going to see him Friday, having dinner with him Friday. All right, Colt Savage. In recent months, you've convinced me that the right is a greater threat than the left, although I'm still torn. Aren't we all? And I plan on voting for the Republicans this November because of the crap the Democrats are doing now. Is this okay? Look, I'm not telling you how to vote. I mean, you guys decide how to vote. I have, voting, particularly on congressional election, it depends on the particular candidates you have. The Republican you vote for might not be that bad versus the Democrat who might be awful, or the other way around. So I just don't believe in voting for a particular party no matter what. I think that's bad strategy and bad thinking and bad long-term investment in the country. I think one has to be willing to punish the people you generally support when they misbehave. So if you're generally Republican, but Republicans are full of shit and do horrible things, then you have to make them pay for it. You have to make them pay for it. So what do you call it? Vote for whoever you think makes sense. I think I'm a big believer, and I've told you this for years and years, although, Colt, you haven't been around for years and years, but I've told you this Everybody is and is. I'm a big believer in divided government. The fact that the Republicans lost the Senate in 2020 is one of the great sins of Donald Trump, and we're paying for it. We're paying for it with the CHIPS bill, although Republicans voted for that. We're paying for it with the with this ridiculous so-called inflation, fight inflation now bill that is another $700 billion of government spending. We're paying heavily for the fact that the Democrats have the House, the Senate, and the White House. And that is a disaster, and it always will be a disaster. And the fact that the Republicans lost both seats in Georgia is Donald Trump's fault. As I've often said, it stuns me that Republicans support such a loser. Donald Trump lost the House of Representatives that was Republican. He lost it in 2018 to the Democrats. He lost the Senate to the Democrats in 2020. He did it. And he lost the presidency in 2020 to, of all people, the nothingness of Joe Biden. And there is a very, very good chance that because Donald Trump has been pushing really, really, really bad candidates for the Senate on Republicans, that the Republicans have a chance of actually losing more seats in the Senate in 2024. I'm not sure that'll happen, but there's a good chance that will happen. So let's hope Republicans can win the House, because I don't think they're going to win the Senate. Now, we'll see. You know, election is still 3 months away, and I'm usually pretty bad about predicting elections. So maybe Republicans will win the Senate. Right now it doesn't look good. And mainly because of the really, really bad candidates that Trump has endorsed and pushed. You know, is Dr. Oz going to win Pennsylvania? Is the Republican going to win the governorship in Pennsylvania? These are two seats that the Republicans should be winning, but probably won't because of the kind of candidates that they have run and the kind of candidates that Trump has supported. I mean, is J.D. Vance for sure going to win Ohio? Ohio's like a solid red state, but is J.D. Vance going to win it for sure? It's much closer than you would think. The Democrats are doing much better than you would expect. So, if I were you, Colt, I would definitely vote for Republicans for the House. Senate, I don't know who's running. I don't know. Is Texas even got a senator up for grabs this time? I don't think so. So, for the House, I hope Republicans win the House. Daniel says, thanks for the interesting ESG shows. That topic is much better than the woke nonsense. More econ shows. Yeah, you say that. But I look at my stats and I look at viewership, and whenever I do an economic topic like ESG or like analyzing what stock buybacks or any of these things, they get a lot less views. So I'm torn, right? I like doing the economic stuff. I think it's much more valuable to you guys, and I keep doing them. But you have to realize you guys need to do more to share them. Do more to get the word out there, because I get much bigger viewership if I put Trump in the title, right? There are 141 people watching right now live because Trump is in the title. If I put ESG in the title, I get 80 people watching live. It's tough, Daniel. I'm trying to stay motivated, but it's tough. I've talked about MMT in the past. I've done in-depth analysis of MMT. I'm pretty sure I did, like 2 years ago. Tony, can you spell the professor's name so I can find his work online? Which professor? Which professor? So I closed. Is this the computer science professor who let me find his name. Professor Stuart Regis, R-E-G-E-S, R-E-G-E-S, from the University of Washington, Washington State. Okay, Regis, R-E-G-E-S. Whoops. Ian says, the Europeans who came to North America didn't even treat their own citizens as individuals. Most of them were serfs. No one could vote. That's all true, but the American government was based on individualism. The American government was based on the principle of individualism. The American government and the American military should have insisted on treating them as individuals or found ways to treat them as individuals. And I don't think that effort was made. And partially because, there was a certain attitude towards blacks and slaves and Indians. They were, in a sense, subhuman. And they didn't treat them fully as human, fully as individualists. And just like America should have eradicated slavery a lot earlier than it did, it should have treated the Native Americans differently than it did. And the primary difference should have been around not treating them as a collective, not treating them as a tribe. Stephen Pettit, thoughts on the movie Apocalypto. For me, it was the first time I saw a movie and really grasped the brutality and insanity of tribalism and primitive mysticism. I think this was the Mel Gibson movie about the Inca. Was it the Inca in Mexico? It was in a native language and you couldn't understand anything, no subtitles, if I remember right, something like that. Yeah, I mean, very powerful. I don't think that was the purpose of the movie, or I don't know that was the purpose of the movie. But yes, it shows the tribalism, the primitive mysticism in its most, it was the Mayans, not the Inca, sorry, the Mayans. It shows it in the brutality of it, the mindlessness of it. But really, all you have to do to get that is read the Old Testament. The Old Testament has exactly the same brutality and mindlessness. It has the same authoritarianism. I mean, I could go on and on and on with stories from the Old Testament, how authoritarianism and mindlessness and brutality and tribalism and primitive mysticism are manifest. And this is what God of the Old Testament encourages. So it's not surprising that the Spaniards who took their religion seriously were pretty brutal, right? To the Mayans, who were brutal to their own people. But that's, civilization. Part of what civilization is a process of eliminating brutality, of eliminating tribalism, of eliminating primitive mysticism. That's what civilization entails. And that's why part of what civilization entails is getting rid of religion. Because religion is primitive mysticism. Religion is brutal. Religion is horrific. Yeah, the Quran is horrifically violent, horrifically horrible. It's horrible. But this is the difference. The Quran is a holy book to one religion. The Old Testament is a holy book to all three. And it is a horrible, horrible view of the world, view of God, view of mankind. The commandments are terrible. Everything about it is just horror. And religion, therefore, is a destructive set of ideas. It's a primitive form of philosophy, which is destructive and uncivilizing. And that's why to be civilized is to be secularized. And that's what happens from the Renaissance to the Enlightenment. The Western world is secularized, and that's what saves it. That's what saves it. And it's the mysticism of communism and fascism, which is just hashed over Christianity, which is anti-Western. True Western is the individualism, the secular individualism of the Enlightenment and much of the West since then. Frank says, other than Cherokees, did any Native Americans work the land, like building roads, to prove that the land belonged to them when it was later stolen? I mean, there were definitely agricultural tribes. There were definitely plots of land. There were many tribes. You can see that in New Mexico and other places that actually cultivated the land, changed the land, and in that sense, that land belonged to them. They cultivated it. So not all Native American peoples were nomads. Not all of them were warring. Pueblos were the ones in New Mexico. Not all of them, they were agriculture. And once you get into agriculture, you get into property rights. Scott says, could you ask LP what he thinks of DeSantis? Probably, but I'm not going to tell you. As I've told you many times in the past, I have conversations with Leonard Peikoff about a lot of different things, a lot of different subjects. We argue, we disagree, we agree, we don't agree, but I don't make that public. I don't resort to authority. I'm not here to suck up to you. I'm not here to, Leonard's a friend. We talk about a lot of different things. And unless he wants me to make it public for him, I'm not going to. So I'm sure we'll talk about politics. We always do. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree, but we almost always, it's hard not to, when you're talking to Leonard Peikoff, talk about politics. Daniel says, I was a daily listener of Shapiro before the Supreme Court ruling on abortion. I just can't get over how evil the conservative view of abortion is. Even Ben Shapiro, who's definitely one of the better conservatives, but they're all. I mean, once you get into where the rubber hits the road, they're nasty. And the thing about Ben Shapiro is that while I respect him, and I think he's really smart, and on certain issues we agree, he completely caved on Trump. He hated Trump. He despised Trump. He thought Trump was bad for the country. He told me so privately. Early on in the Trump administration, he was super critical of Trump. And then once he realized that to keep his audience, he needed to suck up to Trump, all those principles were gone. All those principles were gone. And, that's religion. That's what a religionist, that's what happens. So, Shapiro is not very useful, given that he caves to the prevailing wisdom. That's one thing you won't get from me, is caving on these issues. You might not like what I have to say, but I ain't caving to the numbers, to the dollars, to the people in the chat, to the people anyway. That's not principle you're on? I don't understand what you mean. What's not principle? It is a principle to tell the truth, to tell your audience what you really think. And when you start not doing that, you're not being principled. I think that's what I said. That's at least what I meant. All right, last question, unless somebody jumps in with the super chat. Okay, I get what you're saying. Z-Racer, I'm not sure I get what I said, how that's connected to what I said, but that's okay. Theme Master says, is Buddhism the least bad religion? No, it's probably, in some respect, it's a worse religion, because Buddhism is, with all the problems in the Judeo-Christian religions, they are this worldly. They are, including Islam, by the way, they are this worldly in the sense of dealing with the world, dealing with the material world, dealing with creating stuff. Civilization can arise out of Judeo-Christian principles. It has to reject some of them, but it can arise from them. Buddhism, because they don't completely denounce material reality. You still have to deal with material reality. Buddhism, from my understanding, because it is a rejection of material reality, it's a complete rejection of it. And the ultimate, to achieve ultimate peace in Buddhism means to reject all material things, then Buddhism is a religion of passivity and not dealing with the world, not dealing with reality. You can't build on that. You can't go anywhere with that. And this is why I think Buddhist countries tend to be poor countries. So Z-Racer says, Ben losing his principle when it's not convenient isn't principle, is what I meant. That's true. We agree. All right. All right, Stephen says, why do you dislike Trump so much? Oh, God. I have learned he did quite a bit of good things. The media covered a lot of it up, though. Why do I dislike Trump so much? Because Trump is a destroyer. His fundamental modus operandus is destruction. He is a, here we go, Z-Racer will criticize me on this. He is a principled liar. He is the most consistent pragmatist, philosophical pragmatist there's ever been president of the United States. Ayn Rand condemned JFK for being the worst kind of pragmatist imaginable, and she condemned him to hell because of it. I mean, she was very anti-JFK because of his pragmatism. Donald Trump makes JFK look like the ultimate principled, principled actor. Trump, from day one, relished in lying. But it's not kind of the lie where you kind of try to pass one over people. No, it's kind of a bold-faced lie. You don't care that everybody knows it's a lie, but you say it to piss people off. You say it to make a point. You say it because some people will believe it no matter what. You know it's lying, but it's to achieve a particular result. And he governed that way. He made making stuff up from scratch. He made that a legitimate way of governing, of functioning, of dealing with American people, dealing with reality. All he cared about was the result of the action. He was the most narcissistic person I've ever met. I haven't met him, that I've ever seen in public life. I mean, they're all narcissists. All Trump cared about was what people thought. He had no caring about the actual consequences, the actual outcome, the actual where it's going to go. It's for the same reason that he could be, a secular, non-religious, philandering, married multiple times, pro-abortion, and then when it came to getting the evangelicals and becoming loved by the evangelical, he was the most pro-religious, pro-Christianity, anti-abortion president ever. Believing truth, reality, what you think, doesn't matter. All that mattered was appeasing the people he thought he needed to appease and, getting people to think about him in a particular way. His foreign policy was that, with the exception of his foreign policy with regard to Israel, his foreign policy with regard to every other issue was just a massive disaster. He cowered before Putin. He literally, on stage, said that he believes Putin over his own over the American intelligence agencies. To this day, just 2 days ago, he said at CPAC, he said that Xi has many, many good qualities, a good guy. Xi, the dictator of China, is a good guy. His tariffs were a disaster. His groveling before the brutal dictator of North Korea was shameful and disgusting, and was one of the weakest America has ever been on the world stage in its entire history. He pissed off our allies while you know, being super friendly to our enemies. He signed a peace treaty with the Taliban. I mean, everybody blames Biden for the retreat from Afghanistan, and he deserves all the blame possible. But Trump signed a peace deal with him. He didn't say a word, not a word, about China's taking over Hong Kong. Indeed, he didn't condemn China ever for being an authoritarian, brutal regime to its own people, because Trump doesn't care about individual rights. He never referenced the Constitution or individual rights or the Bill of Rights or rights in principle. He constantly threatened the media, in ways that were borderline, I think, violations of free speech. You know, he would call up CEOs, talk about central planning, would call up CEOs and tell them that they're not allowed to close this plant, that they need to do this, that they need to do that, as he was some central planner in chief. He had the most childish, zero-sum, primitive understanding of trade that I've seen in anybody. I mean, I know Marxists who understood trade better than Donald Trump. What else? I mean, I could go on and on and on. I cannot think of a more unprincipled, you know, narcissistic, lying, incompetent. I mean, he was unbelievably incompetent. He didn't hire enough people. He didn't drain the swamp. You know, think about all the books. I mean, he hired a lot of people, and he hired some very good people. He hired some very good people around him, and then he fired them all. And all of them have written about his presidency. All of them. You know, General Mathis, who everybody thought was God when Trump hired him, has written about Trump and you know, how horrific Trump was. Kelly, McMaster, what's his name, his other foreign policy advisor, Bolton. These are people who the conservatives and Republicans loved. They respected him. They thought he was unbelievable. They thought they were all amazing people. And as soon as he fired them, these people became scum that nobody listened to. But read their books. Read what they say about Donald Trump. They were there. They were in the room where it happened. And it's not one. It's not two. It's not five. It's like every one of these books. They all describe the same kind of crazy, irresponsible, unthinking, stupid person that Trump is. And narcissistic, not caring about America, having no clue what America is or what America represents. I mean, the worst thing that Trump did, is claim to be America first. When he has no clue what America is, and he has no clue what first would be. So what he did was undermine the idea of America first. I'm America first. He's not. He's America in the pits. So he destroyed America first. No war, 4 years? What do you call troops in Afghanistan for 4 years, including an increase in the troops in 2018, increase in the number of troops sent to Afghanistan? What do you call the war in Syria, which he never actually got American troops out of? What do you call the war in Iraq, which he never got American troops out of? No war in 4 years. What do you call the American troops dying in Africa? Dying in Africa, ambushed by ISIS in Africa. And don't tell me that didn't happen. Why didn't he get the troops out of Africa? Why aren't the troops out of Asia? Why do we have troops all over the world in 120 different countries to this day? Trump didn't get them out. Trump could have got them out. He didn't do it. He had all the opportunity. He was commander-in-chief of the military for 4 frigging years. Did he do anything? Didn't happen. American troops didn't die in Africa when Trump was president. God, you guys, I mean, if you're gonna defend somebody, something, at least know the facts. I know American foreign policy. I know American military history. No wars. Signing peace treaties. Syria, Libya, what's Syria and Libya got to do with it? Libya was over by the time Trump got to office. And Syria, Trump was in Syria. Trump kept troops in Syria. The only time Trump withdrew some troops from Syria is when the dictator of Turkey, Erdogan, demanded that Trump withdraw some troops so he could go to kill some Kurds, the allies of America, so that Turkey could kill the allies of America, the Kurds. Then Trump said, okay, I'll move the troops to give you space so you can kill the people you want to kill. That's Trump's foreign policy. As I said, the only positive thing he did was with regard to Israel. It was the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem and the Abraham Accords, which really I don't think Trump cared one way or another. That was, what's his name, his son-in-law, who did that, and it was going to happen, I believe, anyway, because it was in the economic interest of the Gulf states to do it. And I'm not sure in the long run Israel is better off, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, so that gives you a flavor of what I hate about Trump. It doesn't give you the full picture, because to do that, I would actually have to sit down and write it all out and prioritize it and rank it and really work through, you know, what are they. But and if he runs for president, believe me, if Trump runs for president, you will hear from me over and over and over and over again. You'll be so sick of it. The extent to which I don't like Trump, why I don't like Trump, all the reasons I don't like Trump. I'll break it down for you in terms of the economy. By the way, unemployment right now in the United States, unemployment is as low as it was under Trump. Trump claimed the economy under him was the greatest in all of human history. I mean, it's just bizarre nonsense. But I will do economy, I will do foreign policy, I will do Israel, I will do every single piece of this. Every single piece. Labor participation under Trump was better than it is right now, but much worse than it was earlier, before 2008. So Trump did not have the greatest economy in human history by any measure. Economic growth was pathetic under Trump. Stock market did well. Economic growth did terrible. And even then, stock market didn't do well if you count 2020. So, no. You're going to hear a lot about Trump if he runs for president, unfortunately. Oh, yes, Paul, thank you for reminding me. And then Trump just completely and utterly blew it when it came to COVID. Completely and utterly, you know, was a failure at his job as president of the United States. First by denying it, pretending it didn't exist, wishing it away. He continued to wish it away until June. Then criticizing New York for not locking down fast enough, criticizing Georgia for opening up too soon, being swayed by his advisor this way and that way, giving advice when he's not in healthcare and should shut up about these things. I mean, he was like the worst thing ever. Yes, he did warp speed, which Republicans hate him for, which I think is so just. The one thing good he did was warp speed. You know, again, I'm not a huge fan of warp speed because of government intervention, but the one thing he did, which is seemingly good, is warp speed. And Republicans hate him for it because they hate the vaccines. So every time he mentions it in his rallies, he gets booed. So you know, there is justice in the world out there. It's just unfortunately quite painful. All right, Stephen, you got a mouthload as an answer for that. But as I said, Trump is probably going to run. And given that he's going to run, you're going to hear a lot more from me on why I hate Trump and why the worst thing in the world could be. I mean, indeed, I think an acceleration towards authoritarianism will be Trump getting nominated, not even winning, just getting nominated by the Republicans. because whether he wins or he loses in 2024, you'll have a constitutional crisis. That constitutional crisis will really stretch this country and will move us closer to, ultimately, to authoritarianism. Okay, James asks, what do you think about the West turning towards government gaining more power? Do you think the trend will continue? Which country do you like more, excluding between UK, Canada, and Australia? I think, yes, I think the West is turning towards bigger and bigger government. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. I think the United States is leading that, is in a sense the worst of all of them, although Canada is pretty bad. Which country do I like the best of UK, Canada, and Aussie? I have to say the UK. If Truss wins, which I think she will, she at least is saying right now that she's going to govern like a Margaret Thatcher. If she does, and she can be successful quickly, the Conservatives can win government again, and she can really change, can really move that island in a positive direction. So I'm the only country of those, and I would add the United States to it, that I'm slightly positive is the UK. But generally the trend is towards greater and greater statism, and there's very little that can stop it. I don't think Trump will be unopposed, although again, because of the raid yesterday, I think he'll be opposed less than he would have been otherwise. James, do you think that buying land equates to property rights even when you decide to leave the land untouched? I'm wondering why people buy land. I think if you leave the land abandoned, untouched, uncared for, I think in the law there is a provision that after a certain number of years, it stops being yours. And I think that's legitimate. I think just buying it and not doing anything with it is, over the long run, not enough to give you title over it, to give you property rights over it. Colt says, genuinely admire that you don't sacrifice your values, really admirable. Also, it makes me sad because I'm a Shapiro listener, and it really kind of makes me sad that he can't stand up to the new right. It is sad. I like Ben in many respects, and I know with all his flaws that relate to religion, but the bigger flaw is that he won't challenge the new right. And that's sad because, hell, we need people like Ben Shapiro to be on our side, at least on these issues, challenging like the religious conservatives, the nationalist conservatives. All right, almost 2 hours. Thank you, guys. Thanks all the super chatters. We did really well today. I appreciate the support. As I said, I'm not sure exactly when the next show will be. It depends on my schedule in California, but I will let you know. I'll try to let you know as much notice as possible. It won't be at 8 p.m. East Coast time. It's more likely to be earlier in the day, so it's more likely to be around 6 p.m. East Coast time, or maybe even 5 p.m. East Coast time while I'm in California. So I'll let you know. Also, weekend shows, hard to tell what the timing is going to be because I've got plans for the weekend. I'm looking forward to being in California. It should be fun. Looking forward to seeing a lot of people I haven't seen in a long time, eating at some restaurants that I haven't been to in a long time, and just being in California. California, in spite of everything, it's phenomenal. It has its own, it has a certain vibe that is, in many respects, super positive. So I'm looking forward to that. I won't be going into San Francisco, I don't think. Although I will be going to the bastion of leftism in Sonoma County to do some wine tasting. So there you go. All right, everybody, have a great time. Have a good week. I'll talk to you, I'm sure, before the weekend, but if I don't, have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.